There's a place He comes to me. Though I'm blind, He helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see Him face to face.
This is Kurt Kaikkonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Face to Face, we'll be in the book of Matthew. So grab your Bibles and let's get started. If you want to hear this complete message in its entirety, go to yourneighborhoodchurch.com, where you can download Your Neighborhood Church app at the App Store. And so now they're sitting up there, and as they're eating the Passover dinner, Jesus, He told His disciples that it was going to be one of them that would betray Him. And nobody jumped up and said, "It's Judas. I know it. His eyes are kind of beady." It wasn't like that. In fact, all these guys, they were shocked because this is the first time they've ever heard this. And they couldn't believe it would be one of them, because these guys have all been together now for 3.5 years, and they knew each other real well. And they knew each other to the point where, being one of these other disciples, where they would say, "Well, Rabbi, is it I?" Because none of them looked like they would betray the Christ. And then Jesus says, "He who dipped his hand with me in the dish will betray me." And so you read this part, and you would think they'd all be looking at the dish to see whose hand is in the dish with Jesus. But that's not what this is saying here. What Jesus is pointing out to them, that the disciple who was going to betray Him was one of them, because all of these guys, they all had their hand in the same dish. So basically what that means is that the betrayer, he is one of us. He's one of our intimate people. And I think it's clear of what's happening in the Gospel of John in chapter 13, 16, where Jesus says, "It is he to whom I shall give a piece of bread when I have dipped it." And then it says, "And having dipped the bread, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. Now after the piece of bread, Satan entered him." But the reason that the disciples didn't catch who the betrayer was, because when you gave somebody a dipped piece of bread and you're the host of that meal, that means you are honoring that person. And so that would be like giving him a toast, like everybody raising their glass to him in a toast. And so what this looks like to me, Jesus, He knows it's Judas. Judas, he knows it's Judas. So the thing that Jesus says next here, I believe that Jesus is giving Judas an opportunity to not do what he was planning to do. And that Jesus is trying to warn him that Jesus himself, yeah, he's going to have to go the way it was written of him. Yeah, I'm going to have to do this, but it's not going to be good for you if you betray me. And so that's what I think Jesus means by when he says, "For the Son of Man indeed goes just as it's written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It had been good for that man if he had never been born." And with Judas, with him knowing that it's him, that he's already made this deal with the chief priest, he already knows that he's not going to back out. And so he just looks at Jesus and he plays dumb, as if Jesus doesn't know, and he says, "Is it me?" And Jesus says, "You've said it." Now, the other disciples, they didn't hear any of this conversation. And that's because Judas, he's on Jesus's left side. So Jesus's head is on Judas's breast, because Judas is actually given the place of honor around the table. But when he received that dipped bread, that's when Judas sealed his fate. He didn't have to receive it, but when he received it, Satan entered him. But Judas, he didn't have to receive the bread. Judas, he chose to receive it. And nobody's certain if Judas was there at the Last Supper. Judas, we know that he had his feet washed with the other disciples during the meal, but most believe that he had left before this next part. And the Lord's Supper here that we're going to look at, that's taken out of the traditional Passover meal. So at the same time, all the Jews in Jerusalem, they were all eating the same meal, and they're all eating at the same time. They were all doing the same things. Except what Jesus does here is that he puts a different meaning on the meal than the traditional Passover meal. At a traditional meal, the host, he would lift up the bread and he would break it and say, "This is the bread of affliction which our fathers ate in the land of Egypt. Let everyone who hungers come and eat. Let everyone who is needy come and eat the Passover meal." And so when they broke the bread, they were talking about Israel's first covenant, that it was through that Passover lamb that they just sat down to eat. But when Jesus lifts the bread, he says, "Take, eat. This is my body. This is my blood of the new covenant." So this covenant is not going to be made through that lamb's blood. But this covenant is going to be made through his body and through his blood, because this covenant is not going to save them from the slavery in Egypt like the first covenant did. This is going to save each individual from their sin. And the bread that Jesus is breaking, well, what that represented, the bread at the meal represented the manna that they were fed in the wilderness. And so Jesus, he had already told us that he was the true manna that had come down from heaven. So now Jesus is using this bread as a symbol of his body as he broke it. And he takes that bread and he says, just as this bread is being broken, he's saying, I'm going to be broken for you. That you're going to have to receive this broken bread into your life. You're going to have to receive the breaking of my body into your life. Because just like this physical bread nourishes you and gives you physical life, the breaking of my body gives you spiritual life. And I know that many people are taught that the bread and wine, that they turn into the flesh and blood of Jesus. But I don't believe that, because human flesh was an abomination to the Jews, eating flesh. I think what Jesus is doing here, he's just doing something physical to explain something spiritual. This is like a living parable. Because you have to also realize that Jesus is there in his body with his blood right in front of him. And the disciples here, they all knew that they were just eating bread and drinking wine, because that's what they did every year. And that cup that Jesus lifts, it's called the third cup in the Passover meal. So it's also called the cup of blessing. And when Jesus tells the disciples to drink it, they knew they weren't drinking blood. They knew they were drinking wine. Jesus, he was just putting a new meaning on it. And Jesus, you can tell that he also knew that this is wine, because he even says it's wine. He says that he wouldn't be drinking the fruit of the vine, which means wine, until he drinks it anew again with them in his kingdom. All right, and so then after this, they all went out and they sang a hymn, and that hymn came from the book of Psalms. And that's what all the Jews did after the Passover meal. They would sing the Psalms called the Hallel, and that's Psalm 116 through 118. And if you read those, you'll read that they were all messianic psalms. And so now Jesus with the 11, they leave the upper room, and they're going to go to where they spend their last evening together. And it's probably a place where they camped often. It's over on the Mount of Olives. It's a place that Judas would have known well, and he would have known that they were staying there. And to get to that Mount of Olives, they would have all had to have crossed the brook Kidron. And the name Kidron means dark. And the water of this brook that ran in the valley there would be dark red, because that's where they washed all the blood down from the Temple Mount to wash it away, and it all ran into the brook Kidron. And so they're all crossing over this brook, and they're walking over the blood of all the sacrificed lambs for the Passover. And so next week, it's going to be another real exciting week, because we're going to go over Peter's denial and the betrayal of Judas and the illegal trial of Jesus before the Sanhedrin. So now Judas is gone, and Jesus knows that he's a betrayer, and he's the only one that knows. And they're leaving the city of Jerusalem, and they're leaving that population of over 2 million people, because that's how many people would gather during the feast. And it's a full moon, because it's always a full moon on the Passover. And they crossed the brook Kidron, and because of the moonlight, they can see that the brook is red from the blood of the lambs that have been sacrificed for the Passover meal. They probably also can smell it. And now they're going to where they planned to camp. And so maybe they're sitting around a campfire. And it was just earlier this evening that Jesus had told his disciples that one of them was going to betray him. And now Jesus tells them, all of them, that they're all going to stumble, that they're all going to scatter and they're going to leave him alone. And then he quotes the prophecy from Zechariah 13:7. I will strike the shepherd and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. And Jesus, he's not trying to shame them, and he's also not trying to call them cowards, but he's warning them. And he's letting them know what is going to happen so not to be alarmed and so they can be prepared. And so he tells them to encourage them that he will meet them up in Galilee when this is all over and when I'm raised. And he's talking about when he's going to be raised from the dead. And Peter, he has a problem with what Jesus said. And Peter, he doesn't deny that the others are going to deny him and that they could all stumble and that they probably would. But Peter tells Jesus that he could never stumble, and he's insulted. And then Peter, out of his pride and his arrogance, he starts to argue with Jesus. And so then Jesus, he goes on to tell Peter, you're not only going to stumble tonight, but you're going to stumble worse than any of them. And then Jesus tells Peter exactly how it will happen, that before the rooster crows 2 times, you will not just be scattered, but you will deny me 3 times. And Peter, he can't take this talk anymore. And he says, even if I have to die, I will not deny you. And then everybody else, they all jump in and they all start saying the same things of how they wouldn't deny Jesus and how, oh, Jesus, you don't know. You're mistaken. You think so lowly of us. But the truth is that God, he will often warn us before something happens in our lives because he already knows it's going to happen. And if you remember last week, Jesus warned Judas that it wouldn't be good for him if he was to betray Jesus. And so here, Jesus is warning Peter that all this will happen to him this very night. But none of these people listened. They all went their way, and they all fell into the trouble that they were warned about, as if Jesus had never said anything to them. But when God warns us about something, he doesn't warn us for no reason. It means something is coming. And he warns us about a lot of things. And sometimes those warnings are found in the Bible, where God will tell us what to do and what not to do in our circumstances according to what the scriptures say. But sometimes he'll warn you directly by bringing something up in your heart, or where he takes his peace away from you, where now all you have is anxiety in what you're about to do. Or else God may even use someone he's placed in your life, maybe a mentor, a spiritual person that gives you godly counsel, and they warn you about what you're about to do. You've been listening to Face to Face. Face to Face on this radio station has been provided by Your Neighborhood Church. If you want to help support Face to Face and put this program on other stations just like yours, you can contact us at yourneighborhoodchurch.com or write Your Neighborhood Church, P.O. Box 500, Romeo, Michigan 48065.
There's a place he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
Tune in again tomorrow at this same time as we continue to go through the Bible.